What is the preferred setup to play Star Citizen? What will be the
We're talking about the controls for Star Citizen. They're kind of a hot topic right now in the community.
Hey guys,
It's
it's Will here,
Starlancer, you
and
name it,
today
I
I'm going to be
probably
talking
played it.
about the difference
I'm a registered
between
certified
playing Star
pilot here in
Citizen
the
with a
United
mouse
States,
and keyboard
and I was an
and
aerospace
playing on a
propulsion
controller
apprentice and
instead.
journeyman in the United
Straight
States
away,
Air Force
some
for
of you will
6
be
years,
watching this video
so I know a
purely
little
to
bit about
confirm
airplanes.
whether you want to buy
So
or
let's
trade
talk
that in
about
order to play
controls
Star
in this
Citizen.
game. Now, I spent for hours on everyone's controls right now, and I can tell you that without they are all
Battle Royale initiated.
Okay then, so let's talk about controls for Star Citizen. As you can see, I'm a fan of joystick and mouse, but this video isn't going to just tell you that joystick and mouse is the best. It's a subjective question. Ultimately, if you have a control setup that you like and you're comfortable with it, use it. Don't worry about what I have to say. But if you're anything like me, and you're new to Star Citizen, and you just want some kind of a pragmatic breakdown of your various control options, just so that you know if you need to go and fork out for a novelty item like a joystick or something like that, then yeah, this is the video for you. The short answer, of course, is that keyboard and mouse works for everything in Star Citizen, and in fact it's the best option for very large portions of the game, such as the FPS element on foot, and probably for piloting larger ships. So I'm specifically really just talking about dogfighting in small ships. Since there are a lot more pressures on smaller ships for maneuverability, there are some other options. So before I get into control devices themselves, there are some game mechanics to understand, because there's several options that will heavily influence what control devices are best for you. The first choice I'm going to talk about is flight control mode. In free spaceflight, you have full control over your ship's movement. So while all course adjustments are made relative to your ship's orientation, orientation itself has no real impact on your ship's course. You need to apply thrust in a new direction in order to adjust course. So the important point is orientation and course are controlled independently. With an aeroplane, you have air resistance and drag pushing and pulling the craft's course into alignment with its orientation. An aeroplane can't fly anyway except forward, and it needs to fly forward in order to maintain lift and oppose gravity. So the essential point is that for atmospheric flight, course and orientation are aerodynamically linked. So what's called assisted spaceflight is basically an imitation of atmospheric flight where thrusters automatically work to maintain the ship's course in alignment with its orientation, and in Star Citizen terms, this is called coupled mode. In this example, you can see the course indicator is being pushed constantly into alignment with orientation. Now, decoupled mode is Star Citizen's implementation of free spaceflight. Now, it's not strictly free, and there are some limitations, but it's as close as you get. The big difference here is that course and orientation are controlled independently, which gives you an extra level of control that you just don't have in coupled mode. And while you can switch between these two modes on the fly, and some players do, the vast majority lean very heavily on one or the other. So the flight mode choice that I'm talking about is between coupled mode and decoupled mode. Your next choice is to do with your weapon loadout. Fixed guns are fitted directly to hardpoints and they're stuck in place. They cannot be aimed independently of your ship's orientation. The advantage of fixed guns is that they're more powerful relative to their gimbaled counterparts because they're able to fit directly to hardpoints, where gimbals are limited to a size smaller. Gimbals attach to hardpoints and then fixed guns attach to gimbals, allowing the guns to be aimed independently of the ship's orientation within a small radius. So this is a precision over power option. In addition to this, when you're using gimbaled guns, you have the option of using linked or free reticle mode. Linked reticle mode is on by default and it allows you to control aim and orientation together. The aim reticle leads and then orientation follows aim. This is a quick example of how fixed guns work. You can see there that the aim reticle is the orientation indicator. So there is no aiming independent of orientation. Now moving to gimbaled guns with free aim mode, you can see that aim and orientation are controlled separately. And finally the example there of linked reticle mode where aim leads and orientation follows, so they're controlled together. So just to recap, your weapon mode options are between fixed and gimbaled guns, and if you use gimbaled guns you have the option of a free reticle or linked aim mode where orientation follows your aim reticle. Flight mode, weapon mode, and aim mode. Each of those options determine how much control you have over course, orientation, and aim, and play a major role in determining which control options will be adequate for the job. In coupled flight mode with fixed weapons, you have no choice of aim mode, you have full control over orientation, your course is auto-corrected, and aim is fixed. With decoupled mode and fixed weapons, you have full control over course and orientation. Aim again is fixed. With coupled mode, gimbaled weapons, and linked aim mode, you have full control over aim, but orientation automatically follows the aim reticle and course automatically follows the orientation. So if we have a look at the rest there, you can see that there are 6 different mode combinations that offer a range of different levels of control, and therefore have different control requirements. My own preference is decoupled flight, gimbaled weapons, and linked aim mode. So I have full control over aim and course, but my orientation automatically follows the aim reticle. which combination of modes is the best is a game balance question, and that's something that could change easily in a single patch. So whether you customize your control setup to suit your preferred modes of play, or you adjust your modes of play to suit your preferred control setup, is up to you, of course. Your course controls are up, down, left, right, forward and reverse. In coupled mode, forward and reverse are replaced with throttle. Your orientation controls are pitch, yaw, and roll. And aim is an X and Y position on screen. So if we bring that all back to the previous chart, then you can see that each of those mode combinations provide a different level of control over those axes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those mode combinations that require less axes of control are easier. It just means that they have less of a control requirement. I'll come back and reference this chart, but let's have a look now at control devices. First up is the keyboard, which is a digital input device with many key commands at your fingertips. Its biggest drawback is its ability to control aim, and it doesn't have an analog movement control option, although that isn't really necessarily a drawback depending on your preference. The mouse is a pointing device designed specifically to pinpoint precise locations on screen. This makes it really good for translating absolute movements from point A to B, but not so good for continuous relative movements. Its strength is its ability to control aim. A joystick is an analog movement translation device, so it translates relative movements from point A in a particular direction very well, but it's not particularly good at absolute movements from point A to point B. So it's excellent for controlling orientation and movement, but not effective for aiming. A throttle is a single-axis thrust control device that has no real advantage over any other device besides analog throttle control. So now I should probably explain the difference between digital and analog input. Digital input is something like a keyboard, where you press a key and it's either down or it's up. It's either on or it's off. It exists in a binary state. A joystick, on the other hand, which is an analog control, can exist in a state anywhere between 0 and 100% in any given direction. So many people conclude from that a joystick is somehow more precise or more accurate as a method of control. For example, I'm pressing left strafe and all I want to do is move the course indicator a little to the left. So I just tap it and there you go, I've just made a precise course adjustment. If I'm going to do the same thing now with my joystick, you'll notice that it's a lot more difficult to get that precise control. I have a little bit of a jiggle there, maybe I accidentally push the other axis as well. So while I have much finer control with the joystick, I also have a much larger margin for error and a much harder time with these kind of very precise adjustments. That's just one small example. It may just be that I suck with the joystick, but the way that I look at it is that analog is smooth and digital is precise. Now I know there's going to be some people who disagree about a mouse being an analog control, and it's something that we could probably argue over, but it's a simulated analog. It's a digital device that behaves in an analog way, so it may as well be analog, and that's why I've called it analog. It's not a big deal. So yes, I have another chart, so let's have a look here how each of those devices stack up against the 8 axes of control. This is not really complete information. You can technically use a lot of these devices for some of the things where I've put an X. I've just put the X there because I don't think that they're very good in that role. Okay, so this is probably an oversimplification. It's just a basic way of seeing how each of those control devices line up with those mode options that we looked at earlier. And we can see there which devices are suitable for which combination of modes. So if we look at coupled mode with fixed weapons, just about any combination of those devices is going to do the job all right. Even just a single joystick can control those options. With decoupled mode and fixed weapons, you have 6 axes to control. So once again, any combination of those controls will do the job depending on your preference. 2 joysticks will give you full analog control with decoupled and fixed weapons. So now we get to the gimbaled options. Coupled mode with gimbaled weapons and linked aim mode. You can see that you need a mouse. You can, once again, use a joystick to control the gimbals, but that's really not an option if you're looking at the best control setup. So any combination involving a mouse will do fine. Keyboard and mouse, joystick and mouse, throttle and mouse. So what I'm using myself is decoupled mode with gimbaled weapons and linked aim mode. So there's 6 axes of control. So I'm using the joystick in the left hand to control movements and roll, and the mouse to aim. Pitch and yaw follow the aim reticle. I'll put up another video with my full control scheme. But you can see there that keyboard and mouse would also work with this setup if you preferred digital input. Coupled mode with gimbaled weapons and free aim mode is another good option, but you can see here that with this option you need a joystick and a mouse. Mouse and keyboard won't work because you need to be able to control pitch and yaw separately from aim, and the only way to effectively do that is with joystick and mouse. Free aim mode at the moment is a little bit poorly implemented in my opinion, because when you pitch and yaw you're also moving the aim reticle, so you're working against yourself a lot of the time. But I would like to try this mode if that was addressed. Decoupled mode with gimbaled weapons and free aim. You have 8 axes to control, and as we see, the only combination that could work is joystick and mouse. Now there is a bunch of problems with this. Since each joystick only has 3 axes of analog control, you would need to use the digital hat switch for some of those movements. So full analog control isn't really an option because you would need 2 joysticks and a mouse, and most people only have 2 arms, so that's an issue. There is the possibility of head tracking, but it's not officially supported by Star Citizen at the moment. It's something I'm going to look into very soon. The more control you have, the better. It raises the ceiling, and it gives you more options and more potential. With more control, you reach a point of diminishing returns, and it can start to work against you, because with more control you need more practice, and there's more margin for error and potential to be overwhelmed. So as to the point of this entire video, I won't cop out and just say, yeah, whatever you want. I'll say joystick and mouse is the best, because that's my opinion, and I think I have a pretty good argument. Anyway, don't dive into the deep end. You don't need to focus on what's the best. Start with something you're comfortable with, and if you're a competitive person, take on an extra few axes of control if you feel like it. Thanks for watching. I know I haven't made a video in a long time. I've actually been just working on this one. Had to do a lot of groundwork for it, and I haven't had a whole lot of time. I've averaged probably half an hour to an hour each day for the last month or so to put it together. So thank you for all your support. I hope you got something out of this presentation.